All right. This is Randy Hoover, and it's 7:02. As promised, I thought we would start at 7:02. There will be people popping in, and I'll have to mute them. But nonetheless, we thank you for taking time tonight to be with us on the WebEx, or I guess it's the Zoom meeting we're having. So by now, due to the pandemic, everyone's used to these things. But nonetheless, we thank you for taking time out to know about the new Michigan no-fault reform. And you might be thinking, why am I even wanting to host a webinar on this and waste many, many hours writing it and producing it? Well, it's because we do health insurance, and for corporate health insurance, we also here have about 600 and something Medicare clients that are on Medicare Supplement and or Medicare Advantage, and also individual health contracts from Affordable Health Care Act. So a lot of healthcare activity, and for years we've been getting questions from people about coordinating their medical benefits with their auto insurance to try to save some money on premium. I get it. It's very important to do that, and but it's we always caution people about the perils of doing such. We were concerned that they would be cutting themselves short on some benefits. So anyway, that's I'll give a little bit more preamble, but tonight's a special treat because earlier I did the same type of WebEx and or Zoom, and I was all alone. So tonight we couldn't get Jake from State Farm, but we do have Phil from State Farm. So Phil is a local agent, and again, we're not going to be selling any auto insurance per se tonight, but nonetheless, Phil has agreed to co-present with me and give us some, because I am not licensed for auto insurance. I have no license. I buy auto insurance like you, but I have no particular interest in it. So Phil, why don't you go ahead and give a little bit about yourself?
I appreciate that, Randy. And as everyone knows, my cousin Jake gets all the good publicity. But being Phil from State Farm, I have been in the industry for 4 years, and I've been working closely with the PIP reform, both what the state of Michigan is saying to the insurance industry in general, not just State Farm specific. So I was highly motivated to join this call and kind of bring a little clarity. There's a lot of noise out there right now, a lot of disinformation about what the law actually means, what is happening on July 2nd, whether or not you need to do stuff, etc. So I just want to be a sounding block from inside the insurance industry to update anyone on what has actually happened, what this stuff means, and whoever your carrier may be, these are some of the questions you need to ask to make the best decision for your family.
Great. So that's it's great. I've enjoyed speaking with Phil on this. Truthfully, we've never met in person. This is not rehearsed and unvarnished, you might say. So Phil's agency does do the auto insurance for one of the people in our office, and she's been very happy. And truthfully, it's been very difficult to get anyone to speak on it. I've had attorneys turn me down because they didn't feel competent enough to speak on it yet. Other agencies had no interest in speaking. They were too busy, or they're actually told not to. So quickly, I'll give you kind of a little background on that. So pretty shocking. I asked several large local agencies if they could have one of their representatives join me on the presentation. And much to my chagrin, we had people that said, no, we won't do it because our errors and omissions carrier. So for those of you who don't know, it's like malpractice insurance for a doctor. That's what insurance agents would have. So my errors and omissions insurance carrier says we're not supposed to give advice, and we really shouldn't be doing a WebEx like this or a Zoom meeting. So they're kind of cowering, and they're worried about giving advice because they don't want to get sued about giving someone advice they rely on, or is there some alleged misinformation. So another large agency, which again will remain unnamed, said the people don't know what they're getting into here, and we're just recommending the maximum insurance for the unlimited for everybody so we don't get sued. And this person went on to say they represent a carrier, they're independent agency, a really large one, but they represent a carrier that actually people can go in and make their own changes without going through the agency and lower their coverage. So they said, we're going to monitor that and send them letters saying we don't recommend what they did, and et cetera. So there's a lot of people trying to cover up their tracks here to make sure they don't get litigated against. So very unusual to have a topic like this. So quickly, we again are involved in the medical insurance business, and I'm also interested in this from a separate angle. That's the financial planning angle, because part of wealth accumulation is not giving it away to people who litigate against you. So we're concerned that there are some aspects of the law that might increase litigious activity in our state, and for those of our clients with assets, we would like to have them retain their assets as opposed to getting wrapped up in a liability they hadn't expected because someone else didn't plan well for themselves. Now they're going to have to go after a pool of money that exists, which could be you out there. So anyway, that's another concern. We also understand that there's give and take to everything. Everyone's going to have different objectives, and clearly there's a lot of premiums that can be reduced, but also people have to realize what they're giving up for that. And that's the whole purpose of this. The last thing I want to do is have someone, we don't want another bad story to tell of someone that didn't have the right policy limits and there's a bad situation. So not good. Anyway, this is the lay of the land. The chat feature is open tonight. So if you want to chat, please do. It's part of the Zoom feature. I had one message I just sent out. It was very popular earlier. We probably had 40 or 50 chats or questions sent to us during the meeting. So that was really great. So we would recommend that. And also we would say the only question that's dumb is the one that isn't asked. So don't worry about it. We won't identify you either. So you could ask all kinds of crazy questions and I won't say, hey, you know, Stu from Madison Heights, nice job. So some of you I know on the call tonight, some of you I don't, because it was it's out on Facebook and we're having a lot of people that have been referred to this call that may not be a current client of our agency. So the key is we handle health and wealth for people. So that's the key to remember. So health insurance we know quite well. If you study our website or look at all my titles on the screen, I know a lot about many topics, including health insurance, registered health underwriter, registered employee benefits consultant, chartered financial consultant, etc. So it's an area that has a lot of overlap and has a lot of critical aspects to people. I know on the Medicare side, people are very concerned when they transition to Medicare. Are they doing the right thing, etc.? And this is no different. People are quite concerned. They're hearing Medicare can cover everything. Why would I buy auto insurance that does it, etc.? So we're going to explore some of those topics tonight. And again, it's we've got so much to go over. We've got a great slide deck. First and foremost, though, is the fact that we have a disclaimer, and this is serious. So Phil and I both believe that this information is just commentary. So it is not advice that you should consider as a recommendation. You should consult your own property and casualty agent or auto insurance agent to talk about how everything applies to you and your family. As you'll find out, we'll talk about children, guests, all types of stuff tonight. Talk to an attorney or financial advisor as well. Liability protection's critical, and some of you have a lot to protect. Don't let a trial attorney end up with your fortune, but no disrespect to any trial attorneys out there. So anyway, the history of auto insurance, we're going to talk about that first, and specifically the No-Fault Act. Kind of a quick agenda here. What's happening right now with the no-fault insurance, understanding PIP, and going on to talk about new available choices and 3 important considerations as well. Lots of time for questions. Again, you can chat them in. Still no questions. Oh, there's one. Thank you. How does Medicare playing with the new insurance coming out. That's why we're here. So you're going to love this in a few minutes. So you'll be a leading expert and you can educate your friends. So thank you for being there. So many of you know we have a separate business unit called Medigap for Michigan. So that's growing very quickly. And but at this time, I think you can. When I looked up this quote, I got Shakespeare, and what I was trying to say is. Thinking about things as neither as bad or as good as they seem. And rather than quote Shakespeare tonight, which was very prevalent, I thought we would go with Lou Holtz. So Lou, of course, paraphrasing Shakespeare when he said, nothing's as good as it seems and nothing's as bad as it seems. It's somewhere in between lies reality. So there you go. Wisdom from Lou Holtz, Notre Dame football coach. And with that, we roll on to the history of the No Fault Act. And let's see. So William Milliken in 73, Governor Milliken signed the No Fault Act. I was in 3rd grade. Didn't really care about that. I probably wouldn't have known it happened actually. But later on, it would make a big impact on my family, but I did not know much about the No Fault Act when it was signed. But that's the start of it. And it got things out of the courts and provided massive unlimited medical benefits to Michigan citizens. Here's a tidbit you might want to, if you love history and politics, a lot of the no fault was drafted at Harvard Law School. That's just where it was theorized. And then believe it or not, you might recognize Michael Dukakis. So of course, presidential candidate at one point, but also he was in the Massachusetts state government when it passed in Massachusetts around 1971, I believe. So anyway, Dukakis had an impact on us in Michigan, eventually came to Michigan. And believe it or not, when I was in college, my professor said, this Michigan no fault is outstanding and pure. He was waxing poetically about it. And he said, the Massachusetts has been very watered down. So that will remember that statement because it'll be relevant later. Phil, can you comment on any of this?
I mean, to the moment, no. We're moving into the reality of where we are today. The history stuff. In terms of what it was designed to do and what it has ended up doing is a very different thought process. But the idea or the phrasing of no fault, realistically, your auto policies break down into 3 separate sections, 2 of which we're going to talk extensively about today because they are going to be most affected by this change. But for no fault, for all of the negative press that it gets, it's really just a somewhat broken system that in theory works well, but unfortunately for a lot of Southeast Michigan in general, regionally, it just doesn't seem to be as effective as it could have once been. So we're seeing this is the first litigation coming out of it, and we shall see if it moves forward. A lot of this stuff that we're necessarily not going to talk about today is designed for us to continue to improve over the course of the next 2, 3, 4 years, and it's going to take some time to implement these changes. And we will keep you abreast of that as that stuff happens, but it's not the stuff that we need to be talking about currently that's going to be taking effect on July 2nd.
Ditto. So while we were not paying much attention or maybe we were, but last May, the governor ceremonially signed the No Fault Reform Act. So now it's here. July 2, it's rolling in. It's going to involve some choices for you. We're going to go over those carefully. Some are saying goodbye to PIP, the personal injury part, and an effort to save some dollars. And Phil, can you comment? Do you want to say anything about this screen?
Yeah, so this is a great summary in terms of the 2 biggest parts of the law that policyholders need to be aware of, regardless of your carrier, is the part that protects you and your health of your household, and the other part that protects you from what you may cause to someone else in another household. So those 2 factors are going to be covered by your liability limits, which on 99% of declarations pages are going to be the stuff that you read that says bodily injury and liability. And the second portion of that is going to be your PIP coverage, and that's what's going to protect you. So the decisions that you make are going to affect both of those coverages. And as we kind of get through these slides, we'll go into what those two major changes are, but those are the two things you're looking at. And just to preemptively answer a quick question that a lot of people have asked about, your auto coverage is essentially broken down into the part that protects you from what you may do to other people, the part that protects you from being injured, and the part that protects your vehicle from damage or anything occurring to that. The part of Michigan no fault that is not changing is the part that protects your vehicle. It will still be on you to determine if you depending on your loan or lease situation, or if you own the vehicle, what kind of comprehensive or collision coverage you choose. That will still be on you to provide the fixing that is needed there. So while there is a minor adjustment in the mini tort stuff, we're not going to get bogged down with that here. That part is not changing. So we've seen a lot of questions asking about that part. Your comprehensive and your collision stuff is not changing. So in the short term, it's not something you need to worry about that may be affected as of July 2nd.
Well said. Yeah, we had a question about that in the earlier meeting about liability and things like that. So that's easy to get these things mixed up a little bit. Let's see. Let's go to the next slide here. And we have a fancy chart, and this is provided by Citizens Insurance. And if you want, this is certainly something that is valuable, but very difficult to understand and very intimidating. So this is not actually a joke. This is provided by Citizens. It'll be on our website for you tomorrow. We're hoping to get it done today. Tomorrow we'll have a tab based on the no fault. I'll have a lot of our slides on the tab on the website at hooverassociates.com. And then we'll also have this particular visual aid for you too. But, if your friends want to know what's going on, just send them this. This will fix their wagon. But we're going to make it less complicated for you. Phil, do you want to say anything here?
Yeah, I just want to jump in there. To anyone here, regardless of your carrier, some people love flowcharts. Like for me, I love the visual portion. I would rather just read this. But do not accept that your carrier should not be able to walk you through this on the phone. It is our job to have this flowchart memorized and understand how to work through what you need and what information is relevant to you. So, I don't want anyone to accept a short answer when, yes, agencies are inundated with calls. We knew that was going to happen. Just make sure that you get the time you deserve from whoever your carrier may be.
Hear, hear. PIP. It sounds like a rapper. What is it, Phil?
PIP is the personal injury protection that is currently in every active auto policy in Michigan, and it comes with your policy whether you like it or not. And as of July 2nd, you will have decisions to make on that. The long and short of it is it's unlimited, it's uncapped, and if you are injured in an auto accident, regardless of which way your medical is going to fit in, personal injury protection at some point, whether it's hitting a certain limit or hitting, needing certain treatment, it's going to step in and cover you for the life of that injury, for the remainder of your life with no cap. It is by itself an incredible coverage that, to our knowledge, most other states, if not, I don't want to say all other states, don't offer this kind of coverage. So just understand that the all-inclusive nature of it is extremely rare.
And it's so good, it's almost like you should move to Michigan for the auto insurance. It's that, it is amazing. So, so in a nutshell, I guess this is a good way to look at what it covers. But what I would say is there's a couple things that happen in an auto accident. So there's actually, there could be a trauma, there could be immediate care, which is first here. So immediate care might be stop the bleeding and things like that, but there's also sometimes long-term medical expenses and rehab expenses. This could go on for decades. And that's just something that there could be a tail risk to an auto accident that's substantial. And that's why Michigan's coverage is so good, because it doesn't end under the current fashion. So you could have medical care and rehabilitative care for years, and again, decades, and easily could go into the millions on some cases. So Phil, can you comment on anything here?
I would say the biggest thing here is, and we're not here to argue with one way or the other in terms of, a lot of people will see something like this and say, well, I'm a great driver, this has never happened to me. I would just express to most people, this is a very concise breakdown, and I actually like the wording on this situation, but the times where PIP comes into play and has really saved some people's households from otherwise catastrophic circumstances, and especially when it comes to chronic injuries or things that are paid out over a long period of time, just know that it is more prevalent than you think. There are more people that end up affected by this, myself included. I have close personal family that have been, they were saved by this exact law. So I see both sides of the coin, and this is not to suggest one way or the other, but I think a lot of people view PIP as something that they're never going to have to use, so they don't necessarily want to participate either as much or at all if possible. But it is more common than you think amongst people in Michigan. Well
said. So I just want to touch on a few things that I had in my family that very interestingly intersect with this. So first, my sister moved to Massachusetts. Remember, they watered down their no-fault law. So anyway, no big deal. Their auto insurance was a fortune in Boston. I remember that. And again, she's much older than I, but nonetheless, she moved out to Massachusetts, was doing really well. She was a very successful consultant in the plastics industry, flew all over the world, giving meetings to the biggest companies. And she was walking in her new hometown of Salem, just north of Boston, and someone backed up rapidly out of a parking space and hit her. So she got a closed head injury. She was unable to drive again. She could barely live alone. And, but she's recovered a lot. She learned how to drive again. She still never worked again though, but she have had 3 knee replacements from it and all kinds of dental work. But the bottom line is, Massachusetts had, I think it was $200,000 is the maximum budget for all of her lost wages, pain and suffering, and medical treatments, and attorney's fees. So the attorneys and the doctors got all the money, and it was not enough to cover her. So she had good health insurance, that's the good news, and she had an incredible disability insurance policy, which has been the best part. So her disability policy is one of the best ever made, and it's probably worth over several million to her. But that's kept her from moving in with me. So not that it would be bad, I was saying, for her, she had to live with my family. So anyway, she's been able to live independently because of her disability insurance, but absent of that, no. The other story I have is another family member, my cousin, when I was a junior high, got hit broadside in Warren, and she had a closed head injury, severe, nearly died, and they had to do a lot of work on her. She was just a little bit out of high school, and she was never able to hold a job well. State Farm was actually the insurance carrier. I don't know if Jake would know, but Phil doesn't know this. But the bottom line is, she was treated well by State Farm. And as soon as I had to buy my own auto insurance, I'm like, I'm buying State Farm, because they took care of Denise. But not that you should do business with State Farm, but the law in Michigan provides well for people that are hurt in this type of an accident. So anyway, there's some times you hope you never use it. I hope no one on this call ever uses it, but if you have it, there's no substitute for a great thing. So which brings us to some choices. Now, these are estimated discounts that are, I think, aren't these prescribed in the law, Phil?
Yes, I would just encourage people to understand that these are definitely prescribed in the law, but each of their policies is going to have a little bit of a unique situation. So the total process to get up to the new liability limits that are required and to pick some of these benefits, I just wouldn't talk to your carriers with these exact numbers in mind, but understand that as you pick these plans, seeing these percentages is the right idea in terms of what you may save premium wise.
Okay, so it looks like, and again, actually, as they say on TV, actual results will vary. So we'll
Let's say,
see.
do you want me to walk through these, Randy?
Please, please.
Okay.
Otherwise, I'll butcher it and people will be sad.
So you're gonna have, the 6 new options for auto insurance. So currently, as of July 2nd, and again, you don't have to run out and make changes right away, especially if you have not been able to get in touch with your health insurance provider or to just kind of ask some of the questions that we're going to advise before you make any changes. You're going to have some time in between. It's not a lot of people are under the assumption that it's a hard deadline to make all these decisions, and it's not. You're either going to renew at some of this stuff or you're going to have some time. But under the new law, you will have the option to remain as is. So what that would mean is that you're going to continue with the unlimited coverage and you're not going to make any changes to your PIP coverage. Even with that, generally we are seeing a discount. So a lot of people have chosen to stand pat for, even a short period of time. They're happy with a small discount, but they kind of want to see how the law changes work. The second one is you are going to set a cap on your personal injury protection at 500,000. This means that, in this case, I'm just going to use State Farm because this is the conversation I have all day. In the event of an auto accident, the most that State Farm is going to pay out for any coverage stemming from that accident for your personal injury protection is going to be 500,000. So you are setting a hard cap at that, and you're choosing to go from unlimited lifetime to 500,000 for any one incident. The second one is going to be 250,000. The fourth one listed on here is going to be 50,000. Now, as you can see, the disclaimer here, that is going to be restricted to those that are enrolled in Medicaid. And that is, there's no other choice. You are either a Medicaid member or you are not. Otherwise, 50,000 is not available. And what I would say between these is talk with your carriers, and I think you're going to find generally there's not going to be a huge gap in premium between 250,000 and 500,000. What we are seeing overall inside the industry is most people that are going to keep some coverage are either remaining unlimited or they're moving to the 250,000. Now, there is going to be some household requirements based on your qualified healthcare coverage, and what that means we can get into in the next slide. Randy, if you can move one ahead for me.
Absolutely.
The fifth option here is the Medicare opt-out, and for those that have Medicare A and B, and it seems to be that most people have A and B in some sort of alternative policy, whatever carrier that may be, they do have the option to opt out. Now we have asked people, and there are some disclaimers on here, to discuss their Medicare coverage, to take the time to go over what they may be choosing to opt in or out of, because there's going to be some rehabilitation stuff, some wage loss potential, that is not going to be covered that would be covered under PIP. Now, a lot of people say I have, they may have some VA insurance or Blue Cross Blue Shield or whatever that may be as their secondary policy. there is a chance that a lot of stuff is covered under that as well. But I cannot stress enough to please take the time to talk with your carrier, and not the short version. I know it is inherently a long, boring conversation, but you don't want to opt out of something and have something happen and not realize it was covered, or that it would have been covered and you no longer have coverage. And potentially open up a liability for yourself, especially in the Medicare option later in life where fixed income can be a challenging, and we're seeing a lot of that. Randy, if you could go ahead one more for me.
Absolutely. Might have switched it up on you, but here you go.
So
Number 6.
the sixth option is a little tricky, and it's called the qualified health coverage exclusion. And the simplest way to explain this is, say we have a family of 4 in this scenario, and someone has insurance through whoever their work provider may be. Now that work provider will provide them with a letter, and they can actually have more than that, that says we are choosing to cover all injuries and costs stemming from an auto accident. Now, the actual letter, the couple that we have seen so far, is a little bit longer than that. And again, you're going to want to go over what coverages you may be potentially either sacrificing or, changing on. That letter will list that individual. Now, that would qualify them to be excluded from the PIP coverage. The rest of the household would have to be covered. Now, other carriers will list the entire household. So that is a decision that they would make, but those are the kind of stuff that falls under qualified healthcare coverage plans. The annual deductible being less than $6,000 hasn't been an issue so far. If anyone is sending us those letters to make that choice, their carrier has realized that is a requirement. I'm not going to quite jump into the million scenarios where this works. We will go over some of them in the questions towards the end and try to give you a broad sense, but for specific scenarios, make sure you contact your carrier, because everyone under your roof has to have the same PIP coverage unless certain stuff comes into play. And a qualified healthcare coverage plan is one of those options. But we have a lot of people that have grandparents and grandchildren questions, and we will get to those scenarios. I know it's where a lot of people want to know what their options are, but this is just the overall idea of what you can choose based on the new law. Now, if you do not choose, and this is the way it is with State Farm, and I would imagine most other carriers would be the same, your unlimited coverage will continue until you make that choice. Now, I can only speak for State Farm in this regard. You can make that choice at any time. We are not requiring that you do it at renewal or at a certain time. Check with your carrier to know what your options are, but it will remain unlimited unless you pick otherwise and go through it.
That was a question that just came in. It is, when will this happen? They're wondering about the renewal. So the key is, I know it's State Farm has one way of doing it, but the issue is, some carriers doing it right now, or just people are forcing the issue and wanting to modify their coverage?
To my knowledge, with what we have heard from around the industry, some carriers are having it be a renewal topic only. So you have to wait for your renewal. Other carriers are allowing you to make an adjustment within your policy term. This is State Farm's approach. We have made our rates available for our offices since June 1st, so that we could make any adjustments as far ahead as possible. So anyone that wanted to take advantage of the changing law July 2nd, that was made available to them regardless of their renewal. So to my knowledge, it has been either one way or the other. I'm not sure which carriers are doing what, or if they have the ability to quote you all the options quite yet. I would just call and see what their timeline is.
Okay, good answer. So a picture is worth 1,000 words, so I developed this to explain what's going on. So if we have a large insurance claim and an auto accident, there's two types of things that are going to happen. You're going to have on the left side your medical, and obviously you want to get patched up. You'll have, whatever the case may be, fractures, other wounds, maybe some cuts, who knows. Anything can happen in an auto accident. So you'll have hospital care, surgical, all those things are covered under the medical part of PIP. Perhaps follow-up visits, prescription drugs, durable medical equipment. That's like if someone has a wheelchair or hospital bed sent to their house, crutches, oxygen, physical therapy, occupational therapy. So all that is unlimited under PIP. And I will say this, if you needed, say physical therapy, you might have a visit limitation on your medical insurance right now. Some of you know that. I hurt my knee skiing a number of years ago, and I had to have PT. I ran out of visits, so I had to pay for some visits or petition the insurance company for some more. So understand, you don't run out of visits if it's medically necessary under PIP. The other thing you have under PIP is the circle on the right, and this would cover things that are not medical. So for instance, custodial care, which always comes up during long-term care questions, that's helping someone with 2 of their 6 activities of daily living, let's say. Custodial care, lost wages. So this is where your income would come in. Lost my job because I can't work because I'm so hurt from the car crash. Vehicle modification, home modification. Maybe we've even seen people get a whole new house that's a ranch, let's just say, on one level. Occupational therapy, a wheelchair van, air ambulance. That's another one. Good luck. That's a difficult claim on medical, believe me, I know. Difficult to get paid, but covered under the auto, because sometimes there's a serious accident and you're not right near Beaumont Hospital. So you have to get taken, or U of M, or wherever you're going that's high-end, great hospital, it's air. Phil, what can you tell us about my fancy diagram here?
I gotta say, Randy, I absolutely love this diagram. It is succinct, and it is something that I cannot encourage people enough on this call to really consider, versus whatever premium adjustments you may get from your auto. The circle on the right is exactly what we're talking about. Obviously, this is something that we don't wish upon anyone, but these are the major costs that, if you're not planning for, you really need to weigh that you may be opting out of coverage for something like this. And, inherently driving a vehicle is one of, if not the most dangerous thing anyone does on a given day. And due to that fact, it's a major thing to consider. So purely looking at your premium, please consult something simple like this. I love this, and it really kind of provokes some thought on, wow, PIP does a lot more than I think it does, besides being, the thing that everyone in Michigan wants to be upset about. It really steps up in a major way in some of these situations that you may not have, there may not be a plan for. There may not be another policy that covers you like this.
Through my travels, I got a call from an attorney, which sometimes is scary because he says, this is attorney blank calling for Randy. So I'm like, what did I do? So I go to the phone and this guy has questions. Very intelligent attorney. In fact, he introduced me to the guy that wrote the no-fault law at a luncheon. It was interesting. But meanwhile, I became their expert at their law firm as it related to COBRA and Medicare and how it related to the PIP. And consequently, I got introduced to customers or clients that we have today that are, just absolutely life-changing impact from the PIP medical care. I think I might have mentioned this earlier, but one was this family parked their car on the street in front of their house. Their son went out to get something out of the car. He was young, maybe like 8 or 7 or something like that. Maybe not a good idea, but either way, seemed like a safe idea. Someone hit him while he was getting out of the car, and he's been disabled for, now he's 47, put it that way. So I can't tell you, he's a quadriplegic, he cannot speak, he can barely move his wrists to drive his wheelchair. He's gotten so many wheelchairs from PIP, so many vans. Again, they provided a new house for the family. It's been every day his parents just take care of him. It's just been amazing what this has done. But again, absent of PIP, I don't know what the family would have done. It would have been absolutely horrifying to think of what could have happened if he had a policy limit, because I'm sure he's in the millions and millions. And you know, a small limit might not have been very helpful, but it's been a great experience meeting some of these people who have survived these things. So the other question on this diagram would be, what happens if we change something? So for those of you who have or are considering because of Medicare or your qualified health insurance plan at work, let's just say you work for a large employer and they're like, we'll cover your auto accidents and here's the waiver, and you, let's just say you brought that to Phil's office and you said, I want to save the money, what do I get? So Phil, what would they get?
I actually, these diagrams, I'm going to steal these.
Thank you.
Because
there's no copyright on
that. This is a perfect example. I show you the two circles, and you know, you understand what you currently have, and we go over your premium difference, and then I slide away another circle and say, I understand. I pay the same insurance premiums in the state. I fully understand households' desire to lower that premium and have to make hard decisions, but do you have an answer if I take away one of these circles? And that's what, you know, we're trying to promote here, is the right information, and not with one agenda one way or the other. But that is a huge circle to miss if you were to be in an auto accident after July 2nd and you opted out. And to try to cover those costs is a tall mountain to climb, and something that I wouldn't wish upon anyone.
Yeah, so we get calls, we've had a lot of calls lately as this was approaching, and for years, the line in Michigan was Medicare will not cover auto accidents. So that was pretty clear. I didn't want to misrepresent anything. And then the Department of Insurance, and this will be on our website too, but called DIFS, Department of Insurance and Financial Services. So they sent this letter out, and I'm not expecting you to read it, but it'll be on our website. And it says, Medicare will, underlined in paragraph 2, underlined, this whole thing's underlined. Medicare will pay for covered medical expenses to enrollees who opt out of PIP medical benefits and are injured in an auto accident and have no other available coverage. So, and in fact, on our website, we're also going to have the Medicare guide, who pays first. We were shocked to see this letter, and it is, you know, but it's enticing a lot of people to move off. Maybe not a great idea, but they are. I mean, we gave them the letter because this is the law now. So, but this is what they get. They're missing that circle. So they go from this to this. And again, that might be good. Some people in this call, it could be probably the best thing they do. They don't have any assets to protect, etc. And if you can't, you know, if your expenses are insurmountable right now, maybe you have to do this. But we're just trying to talk about alternatives. So do you want to add anything else here, or can I move on?
No, go ahead. The only thing I would say here is a lot of the people, just in the scenario we're talking about with Medicare A and B, that have another carrier coverage, this is where I would sit down with that other carrier and say, how much of the other circle do you provide? Or how much do you enhance what I lost by getting rid of PIP? Because, you know, they may provide more of it than we know. They may not provide a whole lot of it. But this is the conversation we're encouraging people to have, is I understand that you have coverage in multiple spots. Please do your due diligence, because the answer is, what do you have with auto coverage? You have everything.
That's true. So the other thing is, again, I'm always thinking about different scenarios. So in my free time, I came up with this one. Let's just say someone says, and Phil, I think it was you who might have mentioned this to me. If someone takes the $500,000 policy limit as opposed to the unlimited, So I heard it was either from you or perhaps this other person, another agent, but it's a 1% chance I've heard that you're gonna go from 500,000 to the unlimited zone. Was it you, or do you agree with that?
Yeah, it just when you start quoting for people or really looking at premium stuff, um, it doesn't. So far, what we have seen 9 times out of 10, it doesn't make any sense. There's just not enough savings there to make that selection to give up unlimited. So the real choice is for people that are choosing between coverages has really seemed to be the $250,000 cap or remaining unlimited.
Yeah. So it's a crazy to me that, people will buy lottery tickets for a lot less than 1% chance to win. So who knows? But here's my example. Let's just say someone buys the 250 cap and they're like, all right, I've got money to take a cruise now or whatever. And they're going to have some spending money, and they have a $300,000, or they have a wretched auto crash, and it's a $300,000 hospital claim. So I'm going to pick on Beaumont because we're in Royal Oak and we're close to Beaumont. So they go to Beaumont and they are in the hospital for, say, 4 weeks, and it's $300K because they were in intensive care for a long time, and et cetera, et cetera. So what happens? Well, they're on the left side here in the medical zone. Beaumont will not throw you out unless you're all ready to go. So if it takes $500,000, 300,000 or whatever, you're going to probably be in Beaumont until you're okay to leave, at least go to a nursing home or something for further recovery. So that's how it looks. And my concern is if someone spent their $300,000 budget on PIP on medical, then they vacated everything else on this side. So now they're not going to have any other benefits for unlimited, or more physical therapy visits, or the wheelchair van, home modification, whatever the case may be. They've used up their 300K here. Who'd guess? But it might have happened. Can you comment on this, Phil?
You're totally right. And this is, I feel like I'm just beating the same drum here, but this exact scenario is the reason why take the time to sit down and go over your coverage more than you ever have if you're going to opt out of the PIP claim, because they are not going to budge on this at all. There is no other scenario. The auto insurance company is going to say, they're going to show a bottom line and say, we've paid out our $250,000. That's it. And at that point, it's going to be on you or any other medical coverage or other policies you may have. No matter how long something like this may or may not linger, it's going to be a hard line. And if you weren't prepared for that, or if you thought in all scenarios that your medical coverage was going to pay primary and the auto coverage ended up paying primary, so you thought you were going to have more on the right, whatever the situation may be, and a lot of people change their medical coverage every year. It's never been more important as you make changes to your auto insurance to sit down and truly know the ins and outs, because getting caught unaware of how the coverage works, it could be a very expensive proposition.
Yes, and I'm going to touch on one other thing because we see the other side of this on the health side. I have no doubt someone's going to get taken care of in the hospital. No question. You're good, because any policy we sell for sure is going to pay without regard. So you're not going to leave Beaumont with any bills, maybe not even your deductible actually, but you'd be in good shape. My concern is everything on the right is vacated when they weren't expecting that. And quickly, if someone was to opt out, going back to this guy again, because they have a waiver, and that's one thing. They have the medical care covered quite well. But if they opt out and they have a giant, medical claim, and everything is they're working and everything, that's fine. The problem we see is some people switch jobs. So if you hang all your medical liability on your health insurance at work and you lose your position, or you have COBRA or whatever, and you can't afford COBRA, good luck. Now you've lost even your medical on your auto. So that would be very precarious. And no one intends for this stuff to happen, but if you do this, remember that, because you'll have to absolutely maintain your Cobra, because it would be a super precarious position to have zero medical driving your car completely. So 3 more things to think about if you haven't had enough. First one's easy. You have to make a decision. We've covered that substantially. Adult children, this is a trick. There's 2 hidden, three hidden things here that are very unfortunate. Phil, talk about adult children that are on their parents' policy that may not be living at home.
So we have actually gone through, and this is going to probably fall under more of the scenarios that a lot of people will be asking about. We have gone through and had a lot of questions about how do we deal with households that have this very scenario? What is going to happen? Because the entire household needs to have the same PIP coverage. And what if certain people qualify for certain things and they want to change that? Or what if someone moves and we don't get the notification? How is the structure going to work? Is there a chance they wouldn't be covered? These are all things that we are worried about for our policyholders. Because, I mean, let's be honest, the flow of information to the insurance office isn't always exactly the same day stuff happens. And so the answer to some of those questions are they are going to be covered. But in this case, if, say, you've got 2 residents that are Medicare and they want to opt out, and they've got, a son or daughter living at home, we're going to have to split those households. And they're going to have to choose their own PIP coverage because in a household, PIP coverage has to match. So that's just one of those scenarios. That is exactly how that would have to work. And some people may lose some discounts that are built in being part of those households, but your PIP coverage extends to you and whoever lives under your household, and that moves with you no matter what. So they have to be uniform unless you have qualified health coverage or some of these couple other options to allow you to make different changes. Now, for those people that have, say, a 24, 25-year-old that has gone to college and is still covered at their home policy and hasn't quite, is either just moved out or let's just say the flow of information is behind on where they are at currently. They are going to be covered. They are considered under your household, and in the event something were to happen, they will be covered. Now, however, from that point forward, the insurance company is going to ask, why were they not living at home? What address do we need to update? We might need to do a PIP review, but they are not going to withhold or cause you any grief in that moment. The same goes for, I might as well touch on it now, for anyone that's going to ask about youthful drivers. They need to be rated in the household, and your insurance company needs to know when they get their license. If something happens a month in and you haven't called the insurance company, they're not going to restrict coverage. This was a major one we were concerned about because it doesn't matter how many times you ask a household, you're not necessarily going to always get an answer about youthful drivers. The coverage will remain, and underwriting will deal with the fallout from the claim in terms of rating the driver and making sure that we have the right stuff on the policy. But you're not going to skimp over coverage in that moment, which a lot of people I know are very concerned about with the more rigid PIP rules that we have taking effect July 2nd.
Well said. Now, let's talk about a guest. Let's say someone comes to Michigan from another state and is going to drive in your car. This is shocking. This is not a good thing. So let's just say you have, like my sister from Boston. She comes and she stays with us, which happens. And let's say, hey, let's go to the mall, Lori. So we all get in the car and we go to the mall. And she's under Massachusetts. And what happens in the car with us?
So this is an exact scenario we had this week. We kind of went through a meeting with policyholders, and they have friends that come into town a couple months every year. They rent a car. Typically, they would be able to use vehicles interchange. interchangeably, and they would fall under the carrier here in Michigan. Their coverage would extend. That will no longer be the case. So in this situation, the PIP for the people living here in Michigan will extend to them in that vehicle. The person from Massachusetts is going to have to consult with their auto insurance company about what their options are, and do they need to extend more coverage at home. If they're renting a car, they may need to actually purchase the rental car carrier coverage for here in Michigan, or consult with, in the rental car case, your credit card carrier that may provide coverage, and make sure that their PIP coverage is up to date, because it is not going to extend at this moment. And again, you may see in the future, you may have an option to where when people come out of town, you may be able to add a rider onto a policy. But at this moment, that PIP coverage will not extend to them. So it is crucial that people make sure they're aware as they are traveling and driving around in Michigan where they normally would have been covered. They're not going to be covered the way the law is currently structured or the language that it's structured under. That is something that obviously if that changes, your carriers will get that information out immediately. I could see it possibly having some language changing, much like Uber and Lyft has changed in terms of who pays when you're doing that kind of driving. That's a whole nother conversation. But just be aware that they need to have that conversation versus just most people's reaction is, I have auto insurance or so-and-so has auto insurance and they just opt out. There could be a real gap there that no longer comes from their friends in state. So just make sure that if you're in those situations, you're aware of that. The good news for Michigan drivers is our coverage is so extensive that our coverage that we'll be extending to other states should not be an issue. I would always consult your carrier before you leave, but when you've got the coverage that we are required to carry, and it's extensive as it is, typically in other states we are more thoroughly covered than the residents themselves.
That's great. So that's a shocking though. Let's just say someone comes from New York and they don't own a car because they just Uber or whatever, and they live in the city. They don't want to park, pay to park, etc. So if they came to Michigan, they wouldn't have any PIP extending to them. So they would be bare except for their health insurance, right?
Correct. And I think we are going to see, this is one of the major questions we have as a company. I think we're going to see some movement or some clarification on that quickly, or possibly one of the first things updated within the law. But at this time, they have drawn a hard line, and this is the way it is. So make sure for anyone traveling that you just make them aware of that scenario, and make sure their provider, has coverage for them, or even if they need to find some kind of temporary coverage through their health provider that will allow for that.
All right, so here's big three. Umbrella. So this has been, if you read Cranes, you might have seen an article on this, and sometimes Cranes is not very friendly to people in the biz, and they said, well, is this a way that the auto carriers are just trying to sell more policies to people? So the bottom line is umbrella coverage, as I understand it, isn't even from an auto carrier, it's from a casualty company, but doesn't it link up with your homeowners and your renter's insurance? And the other question I have is, does this protect people from the uninsured or underinsured drivers? Go ahead.
So umbrella coverage is something within the insurance industry that we have been preaching for a long time, especially if you're going to come in and do an insurance review. And I'm willing to turn my screen around and show people, listen, I find this important enough, and I have, a medium amount of assets that I carry an umbrella, and this is why I think that you should. And in Michigan, it's about to become even more relevant, because the first part that we talked about on your policy limits, the stuff under bodily injury and liability, if you were to be at fault in an accident moving forward after July 2nd, and you were to hit someone causing an injury that would exceed their liability or would exceed their PIP limits. So say they chose that $250,000 option and they exceeded it. You are now able to be held liable for those medical expenses. So if you had an umbrella coverage, that's going to provide you with an additional $1 million. Typically, that's the starting point is $1 million. You can have more. $1 million in liability coverage for something in that scenario. So if you had gone with the state suggested bodily injury limit of 250,000 along with a total accident limit of 500,000, that means per injury, in this case it would be State Farm, would provide you 1.2 million in coverage to protect you from whatever may have happened. So if you were to hit black ice and spin somebody out and they were hurt traumatically, believe it or not, that's an at-fault accident. And the amount of assets that you may have that are available to be used if you were to find yourself in a judgment like that is incredible. So before July 2nd, umbrellas were something that we in the industry found very important. I would recommend it to anyone, especially because it covers you with that extra million in this scenario and liability coverage for all of your autos, for your homeowner's policy, whether or not you've got guests over, a pool, a trampoline, a lake nearby. You can use it to extend to your watercraft, your recreational vehicles, you name it. But it is such a cost-effective way to protect yourself. And with the law opening up that you can be held responsible for something that you have been deemed at fault, you're talking about a cost that would be life-altering just as much as if you were hurt yourself. So we cannot have enough conversations about how important umbrella coverage is. Typically, most carriers, it's going to provide an even bigger discount on your home and auto, which are generally together. So you were seeing a lot of situations where umbrella coverage is actually paying for itself, which is good. But please, please talk to your financial advisors, talk to your insurance companies, whatever it may be. This is one of the most under talked about effects of this law, and it could possibly be the biggest portion of it the next 6 months to a year that we see that really affects people.
Yeah, I'm concerned because with the shift in what's happening in Michigan with the PIP, if you're on Medicaid, you can drop it down to 50,000 bucks. What a deal. And there you go, 50 grand. And if you got into a crash with a Medicaid person and you hurt them, 50 grand is not going to be a whole lot of coverage for them on PIP. It's almost nothing. So now what do they have to do? They're coming after your assets. And with some good planning and a large umbrella policy, they'll probably go away. So that's the key. And that's what we craft with people with wills, trusts, family limited partnerships, LLCs, and large umbrella policies. Allow your family to keep the money with your family as opposed to Jeffrey Feiger, perhaps. So not a good thing to give up everything you've done, worked hard for something that, like I said, a blackout, you're skidding on the ice. It wasn't, you didn't get up in the morning and say, I'm going to have a crash today and skid on the ice. So it's just something that can happen. And unfortunately, people can get hurt, and you need to protect yourself from such tragic financial implications. So umbrella's been around a long time. I learned about it in college. I've always recommended it for all our clients who have assets, and I've had one for as long as I can remember. So it's good, inexpensive, giant coverage, and it can cover a wide variety of things. So anyway.
I will say this just as a personal aside, for anyone on this call, I do realize that obviously I work within the industry and I'm probably a little more hypersensitive to the negative stuff we see. But me and my fiance, upon hearing the minute I heard about how all this was going to shake out, we had $1 million umbrella. We immediately upped it to 2. And the reason being, anything could happen to where, we could end up being 51% deemed at fault on an accident, and we have a future planned, I would not want that to be derailed for the cost of one of us not going to the coffee shop one day a week. Like, it is something that I just cannot express enough to this group and to anyone you talk to. Please consider it for your household.
Yeah, it's going to be, you're going to see, I think you're going to see a lot more trial attorney activity in Michigan. And once people don't have unlimited medical benefits anymore, they got to go somewhere and they're going to come after you. So be careful. The law shifted and there's a lot of the rich pillow of money that was PIP that kept people whole is gone. So, and all those people who make marginal judgments are going to want, they'll realize the error of their ways, but they're coming after you for their problems. So watch out. So our resource tab will be robust. We'll have links to these things and you can download them probably tomorrow afternoon. Medicare guide, who pays first, very good. Dissertation there. Blue Cross's commentary on Public Acts 21 and 22 of 19, which is this reform we've been talking about all night. This is the technical name for it. We have frequently asked questions. So we are an agency that has thousands of people on Blue Cross, Blue Shield of Michigan, and Blue Care Network products. So we have a lot of FAQ, good material here. Who pays first? Of course, the Medicare guide. We'll have, I'll put my charts up too, the flow charts. And of course, the super confusing one will be up there for just humor. But the circle charts, you can amaze your friends at parties by pulling that up on your cell phone or your smartphone. You'll be amazing. You'll reach new status levels in your communities with these things. So we want to have people just be informed. Again, I don't make a dime from auto insurance. I just don't want to see people make the wrong choices because this is the deep end of the pool, and now we're all forced to become pretty good risk. You have to become adept risk managers overnight. So again, our chat feature's open. Actually, chats are coming in now. Good questions are coming in. I'm going to get to those. Phil, is this how they contact you? Is your phone number right?
Yes, this will take you directly to my office. And I will say this, we are being flooded with calls. So if for some reason I am not available, please just leave your name and number and I will get back to you as soon as possible. And I put this out to anyone we talk to. If you have questions, even if it's about another carrier, even if you want me to just look over a deck page to give you an honest answer on how I feel about your coverage, I would say some of my best referrals are from people that I looked through their coverage and said, you are excellently covered where you are at. Your rates look great in comparison to the rest of the industry. Stay where you're at. And they were generally shocked to get an honest answer like that. So for anyone that has questions or wants